Are you in the process of creating something huge and you want to understand how others have done it? Or have you already found success and still feel something is missing? Then this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Alchemist Lounge, a podcast where Alex Atwood chats with top performers to discover habits, routines, and alchemy that you can put to work in your own life.
So Tuck, it is so amazing to see you, my brother. I have been waiting for a long time to talk to you and to get an understanding of the alchemy behind it all and just to get to know you better. So welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. This is awesome. Excited.
Awesome. Absolutely. So Tuck, tell me where you grew up and tell me what life was like for Tuck Stibich grew up, in his youth.
Wow. So I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. My brother is 5 years older. My sister is 4 years older. We lived in just kind of a regular house, 5-bedroom, built in. My mom is still there, which is amazing. It was built in, I think, 1967. She's still in the same house.
She's still there.
She's still there, which is super cool. But it's a little neighborhood near Wright-Patterson Air Force Base where my dad worked. So, growing up was pretty normal childhood. Went to a Catholic grade school and a Catholic high school. So that was sort of part of everything. My brother was kind of mean to me. I'll just gotta put a dig in out there. 5 years older, that's tough.
Yes. So you had a Midwest upbringing, the youngest of three, and your parents were not in the medical field or obviously your dad.
Well, my mom was med tech. So she worked in the blood bank. And when I was growing up, she worked every Friday night just to maintain her sort of certification and all that. And then when I was in high school, she went back full time. So a little bit of medical field, but.
Got it. You're an inventor. And so with 165 patents, did any of those inventions begin as a child? Like, did you find yourself inventing things, creating things as a child or as in your youth?
Interesting. So my dad was an engineer. He ran jet propulsion for the Air Force. My brother was an engineer. And in high school, the school counselor, everyone was telling me I should be an engineer because I was good at math. I was good at science, all of that. And I rebelled. I went to college and rebelled and majored in Eastern religions and philosophy. That was my big rebellion when I went to school. But looking back, now that you mentioned that, I had the chemistry set, I built the model rockets and all of that. So I liked that. I really liked science, technology, all of it. But no, none of the inventions now go back that far. They're all really based on necessity, as we're bringing the business forward. So there's a thread there, but I rebelled. I joined the Peace Corps. I did all this other stuff to avoid technology for a while.
That's really interesting. So did that sort of holistic, so you joined the Peace Corps and you started to study and start to become aware of things that were possibly outside of what maybe your expected core competency was, right? So what did that do? Now you're in school, you're studying something completely different. You're in the Peace Corps. You're taking a different route. Did that have an impact in terms of being able to allow you to sort of have more awareness or be able to kind of put more into what eventually your life would become or your career?
I think so. And when I think about invention, and this absolutely drives me nuts, I'll meet with excellent engineers. I've, co-invented with a lot of people. But a lot of people get very linear in their thinking. They think about it as an engineer. They put limitations up in front of them that don't allow them to get to, in patent language, the inventive step. What is the leap here? Where I love this term because it's mostly, again, to dig up my brother, but who's an engineer. But our patent agent will say things I'm pitching kind of ideas. We want to patent these things. And she'll just say oh, we can't patent that. That is mere engineering. So it's how do you escape your thinking about something and how do you really pull in a new idea? And I think for that, you have to be able to integrate a whole lot of different problems. For me, a lot of invention is figuring out what the problem really is. You can take a technology and it's really easy to see what the next step of that technology should be. But then that's kind of obvious too. It's what are we really solving? What problem are we really trying to invent event around that hasn't been solved before? Yeah. And I think for that, a lot of my experience outside of technology has been excellent.
Interesting. So distill down what the actual problem is or what needs to be solved. Do you have a particular process there or method that works for you?
Usually it's things like going for a run. Sitting in the hot tub, going on a long bike ride, pulling away all the thoughts around it and waiting for something to kind of pop. So it's really not, and sometimes I'll do it on, I like to do it in notebook on paper. I'll just start sketching things and drawing things and writing. And I almost never review it, but it just kind of churns the brain. And then eventually something will kind of click and then you go forward with it.
Isn't that interesting? You know, they call that, there's a term called the genius lounge that refers to having access to that, you know, you want to call it, you know, quantum field, whatever that is, so, sort of right, you know, go outside of the mind engineering and start to see things, you know, in a different perspective, reframe things. And that's where the ideas come from. That's really interesting that that's how you approach things, right? So you pull yourself out of the mechanics of it for a moment and start to look at it holistically a bit. And so you do things like running to get yourself in that state. So eventually you took the route to become an epidemiologist. So tell me how that path illuminated for you. You know,
so that path was really related to Peace Corps. So graduated from college with a very useless degree in Eastern, you know, religions and philosophy. I thought I wanted to be a teacher, grade school stuff. So I got this job in Madison, Wisconsin. This is a crazy school. This school was pre-K 3 through PhD. It was called the Edgewood Campus School. It was run by this group of nuns. You know, it was like a traditionally Catholic, but really no longer. And it was awesome because I ran my study job was running the after school program, which was pretty fun. It was just playing with kids. And then I was like the building sub. So I could sub every grade. I could sub kindergarten. I would sub 8th grade. So I got a really flavor of all the different ages. And they all loved it because I was coming in anyway the day. So I could just come in earlier and do the sub thing. And I kind of liked that. That was kind of cool. And then I realized that even with like doing like the program there, it would take me 4 more years to get like a teaching certificate, like working while I'm working. I'm like, well, that's dumb. I don't want to do that. So I joined Peace Corps. I'm like, well, I could teach right away with Peace Corps. And I ended up, there's this really, it's funny how there are like these really critical moments that you don't realize. And so going through Peace Corps training, my language was developing well. I was pretty flexible. I wasn't like freaking out. So my choice, so they gave me a choice. And they said, we can either put you at an extremely rural site. And like, there's nothing more rural than rural Mongolia. And I'd live in a yurt. I'd be doing that, like sort of the vision, right? Or they were starting Peace Corps Health Volunteer Program. It was first year. So they had 3 slots for that, for health volunteers. And this would be really different. I'd be in the second largest city. I'd be living in a dormitory, a big Russian dormitory. And I'd be working with, it was a nursing college. So countryside students looking to become nurses. And I remember debating that choice, but it was that choice ended up being so critical because I chose health volunteer. And they picked me because I had a wilderness EMT from some camp counseling I did. So I had like a touch of health background. And they're like, fine, you kind of qualify. We want to start a program. So I chose that. I said, I'll do the health volunteer program. And then in doing that, I really started realizing that, okay, it's really not about, they had really extremely well-trained doctors. They're all trained in Moscow. Like during the Russian, sort of occupation control of Mongolia, all the doctors are trained in Moscow. They're extremely well-educated, but the patients had to like acquire their own medications. Like the hospital had no medications. Like there was no way to, at the time there, HIV and everything, there's no way to educate about things. There's no systems. And it kind of introduced me to the world of public health. And so when I'm finishing up Peace Corps, again, in that panic moment of like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Peace Corps is only going to give me like $2,000 after 2.5 years. Like, what do I do? So of course, grad school. And I applied to Hopkins in the International Health Program because I'm like just into that. And then from there, I did more work in Mongolia and then stayed on for a PhD and so on. But it's really that moment when they asked me, like super rural, like live the vision you came for, like in the countryside, way out there, or do this health volunteer thing.
So this came by way of the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
And more specifically by way of actually being there and learning like what the challenges are in public health and in rural areas.
I really had no idea about public health beforehand. And,
wow.
And it's an amazing field. And I could go on for like hours about how awesome it is. And everything relates to public health. But I just was starting to develop awareness of like, how policy influences things, access to resources, nutrition, like everything like comes together to make like the health of a group of a population. And that if you really want to make an impact there, those are the tools you have. So everything from, and I love it because it's everything from microbiology, to, molecular biology. You can go there, when there's a particular, concern you're worked with, to government policy. Like it's the extremely micro to the extremely macro, and it all applies to whatever you're working on. It's really interesting.
Absolutely. And it's, extremely relevant where we are today in the world. But backing up a little bit. So now, you received your doctorate from Johns Hopkins and now you have grounded in public health. You know what you want to do. So tell me what happened next. I want to learn about what happened between that and then becoming an entrepreneur and starting XENEX. I want to kind of understand that.
Yeah. So basically I met a girl. In short, that's what happened. So I met my late wife, Julie. We met at Hopkins. We met early on and we totally bonded over our former Soviet Union living experience. She had been doing and did for her whole career, HIV prevention in Russia. And it was awesome because we could be like, oh, I lived in this apartment. It was like, okay, that's apartment block. We'll call it block C. You were in apartment style A. There's 12 apartment layouts in the entire former Soviet Union. And okay, oh, that's the one you walk in and you have to close the door before you could turn on the light switch because they put the light switch behind the door. We could totally bond over that. And then after a while, we started dating. And then once that happened, I started working on her organization, which was AIDS InfoShare. And just a little piece of history, AIDS InfoShare was the first non-governmental organization in Russia. She founded it. And it was also the last one. We closed it about 4 weeks ago because of the war in the Ukraine. So it was the very last non-governmental organization. But I started working on that. And, grants, it was a huge project. We had 50 employees at one point. We had all this money coming from the UN and Gates Foundation, everything coming through there. And in doing so, so she was very entrepreneurial. She started a Russian, she's a US citizen from Texas and started a Russian organization. She would just dive in. So she had that spirit and her dad was an entrepreneur. And so we're just kind of making our own path and we come across a technology, this pulse xenon technology and doing that. We're like, this might have something. And so we started to, on the side, develop a company because we knew what was going on in Russia. We knew it was getting very, we were working for a while. It was let's advertise. We're working with Americans. It was really good. There was funding. It was all going to dry up. And we knew that. So we knew we needed something else. And we had this technology.
Yeah. So you built your sort of entrepreneurial bones in that sandbox, which is actually very challenging. It's not easy to be an NGO at that time of the world. What year was this?
So she founded it in 93.
Got it.
I got involved with her and then the organization in the later 90s. And so this was really, we started the company. So we were doing that for a while. The company started in 2008. And so it was all kind of in that period, but Russia was nationalizing at the time. And it was just.
Well, that got you, it sounds like that got you guys to kind of catalyze as business partners as well as a couple. And as you started to discover this technology, your core competency of engineering, it started to kind of show up there. Does that sound about right?
It's sort of I think we learned a lot of things over that time, but what you learn is you learn that you can learn anything. And, so I wasn't an HIV expert. I was more of a behavioral epidemiologist, things like that. But, here's this grant opportunity. We need to write it out. We need to do this project. You just figure it out and you're able to learn anything. And one experience I had growing up, I think it was 7th grade. There's some program at the school. I took the SAT. I did really well because I'm good at SATs and tests. And so I got this opportunity. This was the only time I went to sleepaway summer camp. And it was at Northwestern University and it was calculus camp. And the whole camp, it was insane. I can't believe I did this and I actually loved it. The whole camp was 8 hours a day. You would go to a classroom. They would give you had the calculus textbook. You had a graduate student in the room and your whole thing was read a chapter, take the test. If you got above a 90, you could go to the next chapter and you were just supposed to teach yourself calculus. And I was so geeky. I thought that was awesome. Really? And I was around a whole bunch of people who played chess and we Dungeons and Dragons. It was heaven. But it taught me that you could teach yourself anything. And I'm not an engineer. I had to learn all the technical stuff. I'm not an HIV person. And we were doing, international level HIV work. Now I do hospital acquired infections. I'm also not trained in that. You just learn anything you need to learn to solve the problem you see. If you can identify the problem that needs to work on, well, then you got to throw everything you got at it.
Wow. Very interesting. Very interesting. So that's sort of the skill set that you started to build over the course of that decade from, through the 90s, right? As you were working at the NGO, you started to understand how to iterate, how to solve problems, right? And then You discovered the technology. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so that's where the science and technology sort of core competency started to show up a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we have this technology. We have an early prototype. It's literally in my garage in Houston, and we're messing with it. Like,
what year was this?
It doesn't work. What's that?
What year was this?
2008.
Got it.
2008. We have this thing, and we're like, what do we do with it? And Julie would call it the oh hell, why not? It's like, well, we know we could take it to this next level. We have enough money to do that. Oh, I guess we should start a company. Like, it was like each step was like, I guess so. There was never like this big vision. It was more like, here's this resource. We know the problem. We know antimicrobial resistance is horrible. We know the surfaces in hospital rooms aren't getting cleaned well. Here's this thing that seems like it can work. And there's this key moment where like we're self-funding this. We don't have a lot of money. We have little kids. Our kids were born in 2005. So like I have 3-year-old twins, we have house, we're trying to do it all. We're working, Julie's working on grant. We're just different grants. We have different positions than universities. But we have this thing and we're like, oh, we got to try it. And so eventually we went to, I remember very, very well. It was an APIC conference. We didn't even know what this organization was. We're like, I guess we'll go to that conference. It's called Association of Professionals of Infection Control. We're like, sounds good. Sounds about right.
Yeah.
So we go there. We're like self-funding it, plane tickets, hotels, conference fee. It was just a lot of money. And it was in Denver. And we get there. And we have this thing. It's a light. It uses high power UV. It uses plus xenon. And we get there and we're like, we think we can disinfect a hospital room in less than 20 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. Sort of our napkin calculations.
Yeah.
Home microbiology lab kind of calculations. And we get there. And that year, it just happened that I think it was Steris. They were like the platinum, like double platinum sponsor. And they had this product they were releasing. And it was to disinfect a hospital room. We're like, oh crap. Like, we're too late. Like, it's just dead. And then we go and talk to the booth people. And Julie went and she found like the youngest dude and was like flirting with him to get like as much information as possible. And he leaked that they thought it would take between 6 and 24 hours to disinfect an OR using their hydrogen peroxide vapor. They're filling it up with this vapor gas and then have to take all the air out. They have to lower the temperature and humidity. And at that point, we're like, wait a minute. If they're launching and they think that's viable, okay, then maybe we really have something here.
Yeah.
And that's where we went more kind of all in.
That's awesome. So that's almost, so Steris almost, put it out there. They almost put the possibility out there. And then you immediately had a better solution. So
exactly. It was, exactly right. Like they identified the problem. Like we were in agreement. Like, yes, there's a big problem. Yes, surfaces are the problem. Yes, automatic disinfection is needed. Yeah, and they had this insane thing. We're like, oh, okay, this is worth it.
Wow. Now that's a little bit of alchemy there, right? Because you go there and immediately expecting to have things sort of blown up in your face by having a much bigger company already sort of go to market first. And suddenly you realize that you have what I call second mover advantage, right?
Yeah.
So now they put the market awareness there. They created demand. Now suddenly you had a better product. And so that is very, very interesting. So that was in 2008.
Yes.
And that's where XENEX launched. That's
right? Where we launched. And we launched at the Houston Tech Center, a little incubator thing, started doing presentations. And then 2009, we got our first funding.
Awesome. So at that point, you're still working through the NGOs and you're still doing the grants. And now you suddenly have this cutting edge disinfection technology, these germ zapping robots.
Yeah.
And so how are you managing that? And, are you starting to sunset on one and starting to kind of ramp up? What did that look like having so much going on in your ecosystem around your family, your career and everything?
Yeah, in some ways, it felt like we never stopped being like in the student mentality. Like we had these twins, we could kind of work whenever we wanted to. It was just like this big jumble, so we work for a while, take the twins for a walk, make dinner. One of us would work, do a conference call. It was just kind of like that whole jumble, but it worked really well for us. We could just kind of adjust and adapt to all of that chaos. And that's kind of still how it is for me now too. It's just like, there's just kind of unending sort of chaos that just feels right on the edge of being out of balance, but it's not. But it was great. Like, especially early XENEX, I would travel a lot, but then I'd come back and then I'd be working from home. So I was a work from home pioneer, but it was awesome. Like I could, whenever I was home, which was probably, 60, 70% of the time, I could pick up my girls from school. I could take them to school. I could be there for dinner. Like I could make them lunch, whatever was happening, I could be there and then step away. A key thing was we were really, really good at getting our twins to have long naps. And so it was hugely important. Lots of sleep.
That's probably a whole
they're
episode
little, they're sleeping like 16 hours a day. There's plenty of time.
Absolutely. So you found a way to manage it. It was chaos. It was sounds like it was, all in the moment. Things were happening as they were happening. And you were able to structure your time so you could have it all. And you could continue to invent and you could continue to iterate around the new business. So between 2008 and I think 2015, there was a lot that went on. I mean, the company grew. There was there was some challenges and there were some other things there. So just kind of give me an idea, like what happened specifically in XENEX during that time. And then the growth trajectory, like what you started to see as the grant writing, the NGO started to, well, actually tell me about that. Like, how did that go? I'm not going to assume I know any of this.
Well, so for XENEX, so 2008, 2009, we had our first investing. Morris Miller, he was a co-founder of Rackspace, came in and we decided very deliberately, I'm probably really, I knew this from the NGO. I'm not an operator. Operating a business is not my strong suit. I'm not a finance guy. I could do it adequately, but we need it better than adequate. So we brought in partners really early. It was part of our choice, and part of we want to have time for the kids and everything else. So we were able to bring in some really good partners. We did some bench studies. We knew that particular organism, Clostridioides difficile, which is the number one pathogen right now in hospitals causing infections. We knew we had to kill that. It's really hard to kill. It's a spore. So we were able to design those first tests. We designed, there's some benchmark things. We had to prove that we weren't going to damage the materials in the hospital room. We're not going to discolor things. It's UV, everyone's concerned about this. So did those tests. We had to get a product safety mark, all of the basic, liability, building the business, building out the product. And then in 2010, we got in with MD Anderson and did our first trial. And so that trial was an environmental study. So basically we're sampling the surfaces for how contaminated they are. Then they do the standard cleaning and then we sample again. And then we bring the robot in and sample again. And that was a really scary moment because it's we know we could kill stuff, in the lab. We know we can, disinfect. Right. So we're at MD Anderson and we're doing the study, sampling the room. Housekeeping comes in and cleans. We sample again. And then we bring the robot in and zap. So that was huge. We got permission. It was the first time we pulsed, this robot prototype thing that we built in a US hospital. It's MD Anderson and in Houston, really high profile. But it was a scary moment because we have to show not only can we kill the bugs, that's great, but we have to be better than housekeeping. And so we chose MD Anderson, this extremely well-resourced, extremely well-run hospital. And we have to be better than their housekeeping. Otherwise, there's no point. If housekeeping is good enough, there's no reason the company's dead. We're not. And it turned out that we were 22 times better.
Whoa.
Their housekeeping, they would come in, they would clean, they would do their stuff. And there was just so much stuff left behind. And when you think about it, it makes sense. You have picture a hospital room. You've got bed rails, you've got floors, you've got all these knobs, door, the number of square inches that have to be disinfected is just huge. The housekeepers, environmental service workers they're stressed for time. They have to make it look beautiful. They're doing beds and towels. The hospitals are kind of a wreck when a patient leaves.
Yeah.
There's orange juice on the floor. They're trying to make it look clean. And then we ask them to disinfect it and we give them a wipe. And be okay, now disinfect the room. This is nuts. We give them a mop with a bucket. That doesn't make any sense. So of course they miss, and there are a lot of studies on this. They miss half the surfaces. They don't even. And for a disinfectant to work, it's got to dwell on a surface for, it could be 5 minutes, could be 10 minutes. That doesn't. So that was a big, big moment. And once we had that data, we went to sales. We went back to this is, I think, 2011 then. So 3 years later, we're back at that same conference, that EPIC, conference. And now we have a booth and we're selling robots. And we had built about 24 of the robots. So we're looking for maybe 4 or 5 customers. So we have backup robots, reliability issue, everything, all of that is still not worked out. This is a truly.
That is fascinating. And so the listeners don't know, the robots sort of look like R2-D2. They do now. Was that their first iteration? Did they have that look like the R2-D2 kind of space age? No?
No, we developed that later. That was like
Yeah.
V2 started to look like that. The first ones were truly an MVP, a minimally viable product.
Yeah.
And that was the strategy. Let's get this thing out. Let's test it. Let's get results. Let's way over support it. So for each robot we went out, we had like 3 backups. You know, and we would like ship overnight, like whatever it costs. Like if the robot went down, issues or a bulb issue, like we would ship them just boxes of stuff that they needed just to keep it maintained. And what was really cool in healthcare, especially, that was super rare. People thought we were an awesome company. Like, oh my gosh, your customers, you guys are amazing. You'll just ship it overnight. Like, oh my gosh, you know, and we're like embarrassed, you know, it's like, this is the MVP. And so that got us enough confidence to really raise some more money and truly build our, you know, from scratch robot how it should be. And the reason, you know, it has like this sort of dome top is because the second version we built had a flat top, because we're like, okay, hospital space is really precious. You know, they want to store this in a closet. Maybe there's a shelf. We're going to make it as small as we possibly can. And then people would put the like coffee cups on top, and then like we go down the hall and there'd be like a box on top, and it would like crush the bulb mechanism. And, you know, so then we put like we try to put stickers on, like don't put anything, like it's a hospital, like they're really rough on equipment. And so we eventually came up with a dome top that is perfectly, you know, it's the minimal curve that you can never set a coffee cup on it without it rolling off. There's like no sweet spot where you can balance it.
How do you like that? And you didn't have any idea that flat surface was going to become a coffee stand or a drink.
No. I mean, it makes sense now looking back, of course.
Totally.
Like anything, they just put stuff on. They're going down the hall. You know, their housekeeper, like they'll put their tray, you know, their kit with chemicals or whatever on it, push it down. They're trying to be as efficient as they can. We did have one incident of people giving each other rides on it, which was not good.
Oh man. So that's so interesting. So there you are. You've now proven your MVP, right? You've now got another round of investing. And so things are really taking off here. And by the way, this is years before the pandemic. So you are way far ahead in terms of research and technology and development in this really specific space that will end up becoming just so relevant across the world, right? So
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you are, you're building. And so you were hit with a, you know, huge tragedy, right, in your life at that time. And when you're going through what is a whirlwind, really, I mean, you're raising capital and hiring, you know, partners and taking on market. And suddenly this thing, you know, happens. Tell me about, like, how was that? How did you manage that?
Yeah. So kind of where we were with the family is, you know, in, I think 2014, we moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we had bought a few years before this beautiful plot of land that we really couldn't afford, like super early company. And this is the dream. We're going to build this house on this land. It's a beautiful view. It's a beautiful spot. And so we move in 2014. The girls are 4th grade, and we start, you know, building contractors. We're living in a rental home. You know, all of this is going on. 2017, we finish the house. It's awesome. We move in February. You know, it's great. And then part of the reason we came to Santa Fe is that my wife, Julie, had multiple sclerosis, and we were living in Houston, and in the summers, like there's this heat intolerance with MS. She was just miserable, like fatigue, just awful. And again, another sort of random thing, when the girls were right about when we were starting the company, one of my friends got married in Santa Fe, and it was the first trip we did when the kids were little. We came out here, and she said she felt like she didn't have MS, like the altitude. You know, it was just beautiful. It was cooler nights. It was awesome. So the next summer we came back for 30 days. Next summer we came back for 60 days. So the girls kind of grew up, you know, going to camp here in Santa Fe. And so anyway, we finished the house, and coming into, I remember it really well. It was like the beginning of the school year. The girls are starting a new school, 6th grade. This is 2017. We think Julie's having an MS relapse. So she starts limping, all of this, goes on steroids. They kind of help, but she's miserable, horrible headaches. And we go through a month of kind of healthcare weirdness, thinking it's that. And then in October, I remember I had to go on a trip. I came back, and I just took one look at her, and we go to the emergency room. We're there for hours, whole long saga of healthcare. But eventually they do a CT scan, and she has a giant brain tumor. She has a glioblastoma, brain cancer. And we know instantly, you know, she was also an infectious diseases epidemiologist. Like we know instantly, like a year and a half at the most, you know, for a glioblastoma. And this was really aggressive. She had had an MRI in, I want to say like May of that year. It was clear. So between May and September, like this thing grew. And so the girls are 11, and we just start dealing. Like we're in that mode of healthcare. We're going to MD Anderson for care, surgery, brain surgery, chemo. Things seem to be stabilized. And then she just like drops into not exactly a coma. It's like a very kind of active coma. And in April of 2018, she died. And so the girls are 12 and I'm dealing with all of that. And like, so it's, incredibly hard, of course. And from the, for the business, I was really lucky. Like, I was always working from home and we were pretty stable at the time. We had brought in teams, so I was fortunate. I didn't have to leave her, during that time.
Yeah.
And, I could kind of pick up work stuff as I could. But, I'm really grateful the way things worked. Like once she was diagnosed, I did not leave her. Not one day. I didn't have to. I didn't have to go to work. I could work from home, when she's sleeping or whatever. And just kind of take care of the girls and do everything.
So you were, prior to this happening, you had a very healthy relationship, not just between Julie and you, but it sounds like you just sort of had a healthy balance around your life and to, found a company, to bring partners in, to go through, having 2 kids, all of that, and doing it in a way that you were able to put your time into the places that you wanted to put your time is, I would say it's unique in that personally don't see that much in my colleagues who are in that position. A lot of the times there's an imbalance. There's this, maybe the career, the company takes up so much space or something else. But I saw that balance. And I mean, as you're kind of describing this to me, and it sounds like that grounded you a bit too. So in other words, you didn't have to make so many massive changes in terms of your work lifestyle because you were already putting attention on the kids and already putting attention on time with Julie and already understanding, what her needs are in terms of geographically where to live, what's best for her. So you being there, it occurs to me that you just kind of having that way with your family and with your career allowed you to be there with her and to experience that with her. It's an event that, we all eventually end up going there, but to deal with that in such a pivotal time with your kids and career, you did that. And as you describe it, you have so much grace there. And so I just want to acknowledge you for that. And I'm going to think that maybe your Eastern philosophies, whatever sort of had you, I don't think it was just a rebellious situation. I think you had, truly interest there. Did any of that you learned in school or that interest, did any of that play into now what was happening in these challenging circumstances with Julie and having to navigate? Did any of that sort of show up in that time of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, one thing that's been consistent, from as long as I can remember, really from maybe high school is, meditation and being able to take those moments. So not only like, formal sit on the cushion, meditation, but then, really being able to develop like the kind of awareness of what's my reactions and how I'm reacting to things and be able to just be aware of that and try to, convert that into the response that I want. And so just not getting caught up in cyclical thinking and everything. So I think that was huge because I could have, like, there was no space to be like, while we, there was certainly grief there, and Julie and I, we talked about everything during that time and we shared everything with the girls and all that, but there's really, there's certainly grief and sadness, but there's no place to be out of commission. There was no option for that. So I think, especially meditation and sort of the Eastern Zen sort of way was really, really helpful to realize okay, there is sadness here, and that's okay. And you want to experience that. And that's what's happening. But you also don't want to get into a thought loop or an emotional loop around the sadness and to recognize when that's happening and be able to pull out of it. And the same thing with the business too, as things go, a lot of weird stuff happens. And it takes a long time to understand oh, wait a minute. I should be really happy that the sales team, the sales guy is making more money than I am right now. That's actually a really good sign. But until you think about it all through, it's it feels wrong. It's I started this. Why is my salary this? And they're making more. You can get all caught in all this nonsense.
Yeah.
And with investors and equity and dilution and all the stuff that happens, you could get caught and just really cycle it negative. And so being able to step back and catch that and say like, wait a minute, no, this is actually good. We love salespeople to make a ton of money. We want them to make more money. Like, this is great.
Yeah. Tuck, you have a palatable joy about life, and it's just present in you at all times, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of what you're doing. And, I just want to acknowledge you for that. It is something else. And I'm really feeling that during the course of this interview. So how did you take that on, going from having you and Julie raising the kids to being a single dad and having to deal with young women coming into their own?
Wow. I don't know that there is a plan. Because, I was, certainly a mess, like just grief and dealing. But, because they were 12, like in some ways it was really, in terms of my own grief process, it was really good. Like, I've got to make dinner. I've got to do laundry. Like, we got to keep the house clean. We got to take the girls to school. Like, there was a structure and a routine to the day where if I was on my own, there wouldn't have been. And I don't know what that would have been like. But, got to get up, got to take the girls to school. Like, there just weren't, so in some ways it was really good. There weren't choices.
Yeah.
And so that helped me a lot. For them, it's interesting. Like, and I remember, so I went to see, like a grief therapist, like hospice provided that. And that was helpful somewhat. But one thing they told me about, kids in grief is that it's often delayed. Like, they may not want to be able to, or are able to process, right away, and that's okay. And so the girls really felt like they wanted routine. They want to go back to school. They just wanted things kind of back in a rhythm. So we tried to set that up. My mom, was amazing because throughout everything, she kept coming out. Like, I could call and she'd be on a plane like 4 hours later and here, because we had to go to the hospital. We had to go to MD Anderson, whatever was going on. And she continued to do that. So that let me get away a little bit and do some of the work stuff I needed to do. So I was kind of pulling work back in. But a lot of it is, was kind of, it's work from home. So I'm doing calls, audio calls. I miss audio calls. They were so good. You could like be hiking and talking. It was amazing. I could do laundry and be on a conference call, like the Zoom thing. I don't know. I could be chopping vegetables. Yeah. Like I had the headset with the mute switch. It was just the best thing. Like, put the mute on, chop some vegetables, take the mute off, do the call. It was great. Yeah. So I was just kind of working it out, and that was good. Like, I wanted to work. It was something, I needed to do something.
Yeah.
So that kind of filled in, and the flexibility that I had there with the company was just amazing and so helpful.
Yeah. So now we're at the pandemic. And by the way, there's already so much, your life until the pandemic was so rich with so much experience, so many ups, so many downs, so many challenges, and so many triumphs. And now here you run into a pandemic. And so, obviously XENEX, they have technology that is well suited. So what happened during the pandemic? Tell me a little bit about that with XENEX and with you and the whole deal.
I was kind of jealous of all the people I'm hearing about, like mastering sourdough bread. That was not my experience. So the girls, the girls are home, and they're actually, and to their credit, they were extremely easy, like totally self-motivated and just doing their thing. So, they would be working during the day. I'd be down, and I have a lab at my house and where I work, and some experiments and things. And I was so busy, like between getting calls at 4 a.m. from New York, early pandemic, where they're basically like, we are freaking out. We have your robot. What can we do with it? I believe by May of 2020, we had already tested directly against the SARS coronavirus. We were the first company to do this. Like, we got in with the Texas Biomedical Research Institute and San Antonio, and we used every piece of clout to get first in line. Like, we're going to test against this. So we confirmed that we were really effective against it. We're getting like 99.99 plus kills, like in 30 seconds. Like, we're super effective. So we're like doing that. We're trying to service our customers. Supply chain was a nightmare, and our team was awesome. Like, we did not have any, stock outs. Like, they were able to master supply chain, anticipate things, order things. They did a great job. So we're still shipping robots, and we're free, and everything's changing. Like, we usually go on site to do training. Like, we train people to use a robot. We create the protocol. Where's it going to be used? How does it flow? All of this is now remote. We can't go to the hospitals. We're getting questions. How do we disinfect this area? What about masks? What about supplies? What about this, and we're doing tests constantly. We have a lab in San Antonio too. We're able to do the tests. It was nonstop. And then I'm getting pulled into this was one of my favorite pandemic experiences. I was doing all these, especially for nursing homes and like retirement communities. I was just kind of volunteering and doing informational webinars because the information was so terrible. And just, trying to just explain to people what's going on, give them how to do research, how to figure out what's going on. And I just remember this one retirement community I was doing, and I had Zoom set up in the gallery view. So I had, 30 little squares on the screen. And everywhere I looked at any time, there was a cat going over someone's computer. It was so awesome. I was like, where's Waldo? I was like playing Where's the Cat while I'm presenting. It was really awesome. But it was nuts. Like I was working almost, it was more like constant on time. Like I wasn't just so many problems to solve.
Yeah. And did that energize you? Like having all of a sudden having all of that flood of problems to solve?
It did. That's like my thing. I love solving problems. And it was just kind of all over and, trying to figure out, from the company perspective, the community, what can I do? What else can I contribute? And then like I said, we had so many hospitals calling us. And what I was really proud of we could do, because at the time, I think we had, I'm going to say 600 hospitals or so. And what we could do and what we're trying to do is like, they're like, so when they make a change, like we're going to change our infection control policy, we're going to do quarantines, whatever, they have to document that. They have to write out the policy. They have to do all this work. And there was no time for them to do it, individually. So I have a team. I have epidemiologists, infection control people on my team. We would just write like draft policies and send it to all 600 of our customers. Like here, let us, we could do that. We could do this paperwork for you. And then they could just quickly fill it in. So it felt like, okay, this is how we can like help out the frontline groups. It was kind of energizing, like kind of
very, being in full support, being in full service to your customers. Yeah. In a time when you can provide like maximum amount of value, right? And help them to guide them out of this unprecedented situation. I don't like using that word because I hear it so much. But it was. But that's what it was. And they had no idea what to do.
And we had other countries, that we work in. So it's like figuring out what's going on in Spain. Like we have customers in Spain, we have customers in Japan. Yeah. Like how does it work? And having, I'm fortunate that I've visited all of those places. I've seen the hospitals. I know how the workflows work. So we're able to like reintegrate and redesign how the robot's going to be used so it can be most effective.
Wow. So I'm sure XENEX went through a massive transformation between that, May of 2020 or March of 2020 and, March of 2021. I'll assume that there was in that year, there was, probably one of the most impactful years for the company. But tell me about when the pandemic started and by the time a year in, had the company started to revolutionize things, started to change the way that it did business with its customers, obviously.
During that time, I think we beat our sales forecast by like 4 to 5x. So that was crazy. Just like we didn't plan to build that many robots. How do we get it? We actually, toward the end of that year, we actually launched a new robot. We had this robot, like the next generation that we were going to put out there. We accelerated that. We moved that in. A lot of that was supply chain driven. So we know we were mostly US based before, and we wanted to be totally US based. We wanted to cut that supply tail as far as possible. So we accelerated the launch of a robot. So that's just the same thing to do in the middle of the pandemic. We're going to launch a robot, but that's what we did.
But very forward thinking. I mean, you figured out the supply chain issue before it had a major impact. Yeah.
Yeah. So during pandemic, we were able to ship. I think we went from like 60-day to 90-day. I think that was our biggest slip. Like we were able to still ship robots, but we like to do 30-day when we can. And then, so now we're in a really sweet spot because we've fixed our supply chain. Our supply chain is really tight. And we have inventory, we're able to ship robots, we're able to, fill orders, because we knew that would starve the company. Like they would starve our customers if they can't get parts or if they need something. A lot of times they want to expand the program, add robots. Like we have to be able to do that. So the team was amazing and thinking through this, especially the supply chain. Suddenly supply chain for me went from oh, here comes, the supply chain report in the meeting. I guess I'll try it, I'm sure it's fine. Like I'm very confident. I didn't have to do anything with it to the most important department of the company. It's supply chain. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah. Isn't that sort of a microcosm of what happened across the world, right? I mean, nobody looked at supply. I mean, I'm sure, you're looking at supply, but you're not seeing the major impact that is on its way. And a lot of it was a result of inefficiencies that were already in place that were exacerbated by what was happening, with the pandemic. So a lot was uncovered then. And it sounds like you guys were a little bit ahead of the curve, maybe a lot ahead of the curve actually, in being able to rein things in, manufacture in the States as much as possible, right? And get your supply chain to where you could continue to service customers and not run into any issues, which, is unheard of then. I mean, I don't know any companies that were able to do that. I mean, yeah, that is kudos to you.
Yeah, the team was amazing.
Yeah. So let's talk about 2021, because another pretty large circumstance and challenge came about. Tell me about what happened in 2021.
So yeah, in 2021, I finally went for, an overdue well check, feeling great. I'm riding my mountain bike a ton, getting ready for this big 6-day, mountain bike ride, artillery ride to Moab, like everything's great. And I insist that they run my PSA, my prostate specific antigen test. I'm like 48 at the time. It's not even scheduled to run that. And they ran it and it was high. And then ran it again. It was really high. And so, basically, obviously I have, prostate cancer and a pretty aggressive type. So started going through that whole journey, which was really, really hard. And I remember debating, like, I know MD Anderson Cancer Center is awesome. And I want to go back there, but I almost didn't because I hadn't been back in. I used to be a faculty there. I hadn't been back into the main hospital since Julie was there. Like there's all these like memories, like 4 years ago in October, like I was taking her for brain cancer. And now here I am, kind of on my own or largely on my own, going and getting all these scans and everything and figuring out what to do. So that was a really challenging time, like, especially up until, and this is, for anyone, like until there's a plan, until we know, like this, I'll call it the discovery phase. It's really, really scary. And I'm telling my daughters and where they're like, it's like this weird repeat of what happened. Like my mom's coming out and I'm going to Houston for a week to, for cancer treatment. And like, there's just this really strange repeat of things. Like there's a lot of that pattern showing up.
What was it like having to tell your daughters that, to explain to them that there's this diagnosis?
Yeah, it was tough. And, of course, the prognosis is really different. Like prostate cancer and brain cancer are super, super different. But yeah, it was really tough in trying to explain, I mean, they're older and they're amazing and they're super aware and smart and they'll go research stuff. So they're able to get the information both from me and on their own. But yeah, it was hard. Like Julie and I were so glad we shared everything during her illness. So there was no question, I'm going to just, here's where we are, here's what the diagnosis is, here, once it was sure, like here, here's the process, here's what we're doing. And then, they're resilient young women, clearly. And, that's something else at that age to go through losing their mother and then having to, potentially, deal with not potentially, but have their father have to go through a similar journey. What are some rituals, some routines? What's a rhythm that you've put in place? And you've articulated it a bit when you described going through the challenge with Julie and all of that. But what are some other routines, rituals, rhythms that you're putting in place now? Because, frankly, you're one of the most, just energetically open, happy people in my life. And so, there has to be a formula behind that. There has to be a ritual, a routine, a rhythm of some sort that you follow to be able to invigorate you, generate you, and not allow you to get in those loops. Can you share some of those? Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. So actually, we're going to tour. So
I love it. I love tours.
So during the pandemic, I got a pandemic hot tub. So every morning I wake up and I come out from my bedroom to, where is it? Let's see if we can get it good. All right, there's the stairs down. So here's the hot tub. There it is.
Oh,
so it's like 4 feet deep and like giant. And this is my view from the hot tub. So it's
sweet.
Lovely. I get birds, I get the hummingbirds and all that. I'll stay out here. So every morning I come down here, like I wake up. Right now I wake up, I take some medication because that's what I need to do. And then I make a cup of really bad coffee and I just come out to the hot tub and kind of do a meditation first in the morning. The sun's coming, the light's changing, birds are out here. And then I'll pick up my phone and I call it the water office. And I just do all of my morning communications. So all my emails, my texts, my WhatsApp, everything. I try to get it all done. So I might be in here for like an hour or longer. It's awesome. And then the day starts, and then I might go and I might formally meditate. I might, if I have meetings, I start doing meetings or whatever's going on. And then that gets me into my day. And then, so that's a huge ritual now. It's just an anchor. It's like I wake up, I go in the hot tub. And it's just awesome. It's warm. It's great. Like it could be like 30 degrees out here. It's even better. It's like, this is amazing. And just be there. And then, throughout the day, like my schedule is really chunky. So I might have a meeting and then a break, meeting break. So I try to use that space. I try not to like surf or like doom scroll or web anything or email anything. Cause so I'll play the guitar, just try to like relax and do it. And I try to do something active every day, mountain biking. Right now my trainer has me rucking. So I'm wearing a backpack with like 30 pounds in it and just hiking around the hills. But something active, I think, is super huge. And then I have a second hot tub in the evening to like undo the day.
I love it. So this is serving to ground you, become present. I mean, you have exposure to nature right away. You have potentially a challenge in the morning, getting into cold water and then overcoming that challenge and being able to kind of create and open up all of those channels. Like that is awesome. So where you are now, like what are you looking forward to, coming up? Like what are some things that are getting you going as you're looking over the next, 6 months, year? And it could be with XENEX, it could be with the kids. Just give me sort of an overall idea. What are some things that are really getting you going and what are you looking forward to?
Yeah. So I think, I'm with the family, with the kids, like my relationship with them, I really love it. And we'll have like these 2-hour-long discussions about just any topic. It's just really fun to see they're adults, like they're people and they have like ideas and it's just so fun to engage with them. And so I'm looking forward, to that increasing. It kind of gives me a vision of how my relationship will be with them as adults. And it's just really cool. And I'm really excited for that. It's like, they're doing all these interesting things. They're reading a ton. They're just pulling in information, integrating it and forming ideas. And it's so awesome. And there's so much like better than I am. Like they're so much more mature and like their awareness of like social awareness is just awesome. Yeah. So that's super fun. And that's great. I'm in a new relationship, or not that new, but that's awesome. And it's been really, really great. So continuing to develop and it's really fun. And also like my daughters will start driving soon. So it's kind of loosening up. Again, it's changing the relationship. Like the roles are different. Like they're very independent now. And so I'm hoping to travel more and especially travel to see friends more. Like I haven't done that for a long time. I've done necessary work travel, but discretionary travel hasn't really come up so often. And I'm really excited for that.
Yay. That's awesome. So
yeah.
So it seems like there's possibilities for now the new relationship with the daughters. And that is such a beautiful thing that when you go from being the caretaker to now seeing them as these adults who are just blossoming into these amazing spirits that are going to take on so many challenges and have so many beautiful experiences in their lives. And you get to reshape your relationship so as to be able to allow them to show up in their full presence as these, strong, resilient women that they are. And I know Julie's still there and she's still a part of the family. And I mean, it's just beautiful. So your story is inspiring. And it's not even that you mean it to be inspiring. You're just living life. And no, really, I mean, you're just living life. You're taking on challenges and you're just moving through there. And one thing that I always get when I talk to you is that it's clear to me that you love being on this earth, living this life, going through these experiences, no matter how challenging, no matter how difficult. It's clear that you're truly, truly joy about being, on the earth and experiencing every day. And you show that just in the words. You don't even have to say anything, just the way you show up. So thank you for that. And look, a lot of people may listen to this interview. It's the co-founder of XENEX, large, disinfection, germ zapping robot company that's cutting edge. When it comes down to it, it came out of a beautiful, loving relationship, right? And it comes from a place of family. It comes from a place of hard work and of insight and of different, iterating and inventing and constantly staying new and constantly not getting caught up in failure or not getting caught up in what challenge may bring you down. And I've seen that in you, your family, your career, truly inspiring, amazing. And, you're an inventor, father, and just a truly conscious, awesome human being. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you for the field trip around your house. That's awesome. I can't wait to come out there and see you.
Absolutely.
And if there's anything else to share, what's your one piece of wisdom you'd want to kind of put out there?
For me right now, especially having just gone through treatment and all that, I don't know where it comes from, but it's everything for me is about energy. Like I think about does this cost me energy? I got out of thinking about time. And it's just like energy. Like I want to feel good. I want to feel energetic. And that opens up every possibility.
Love it. It's all about energy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tuck. This was an awesome interview. I cannot wait to see you in person. And if any of you listening want to hear more about XENEX, if you want to hear more about Tuck, you can click on the bio there and you can get all the information about the companies. Thank you so much for joining, Tuck, and I can't wait to see you soon.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening in to the Alchemist Lounge. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review on Apple iTunes. To catch all the latest from Alex Atwood, you can check out his website at alexatwood.co. Thanks again, and we'll catch you next time at the Alchemist Lounge.